Thank you so much, Adam. Really excited to be here, and really looking forward to meet our panelists. Perfect. Welcome, panelists. It's an honor to have you here on panel three of today's event. As you know, the topic of the panel is the significance of data standardization and particularly embracing and developing compliant data models. Data is the cliche or the new buzzword. Data is the new oil, right? And particularly for us in the oil and gas and energy industry, how do we make use of data, in the most efficient way, and actually make sense of all of the, I don't know, gigabytes or terabytes or even more that we produce. So I think we cannot have more apt topic to discuss, and really looking forward to the panel members' views, insights, and experience on this. Maybe let me briefly introduce the panel members, and I'll also hand over to each one to speak a little bit more about the work that they're doing before we start on our discussion. Welcome, Padmanabh Padiyar. He is the head of data strategy and performance at PETRONAS. Very happy to have you here. Robert da Silva Bressan, who is leading Subsea automation and digital solutions at Petrobras. Welcome. It's an honor to have you here as well. Botan Osman, who is the CEO of Restrata. Thank you so much for joining the panel, Botan. Really looking forward to a fantastic discussion. And last but not least, Lynn Whitworth, who is the Director of Client Services of Datum 360. Welcome, Lynn, and an honor to have you here as well. So let me hand over to each of you to speak a little bit more about the work you're doing. And let's start with Padmanabh, Paddy for short. Over to you, Paddy.
Thanks, Sundeep, and thanks for this opportunity to Adam and the team of Future Oil and Gas. It's a privilege to be here. So I'm going by Paddy, short for Padmanabh. I've been with Petronas for about less than a year, and prior to this, I was associated with IBM for close to about 12 years, leading the data and analytics practice. Within Petronas, basically, I look at the enterprise data architecture and strategy. We're really working on a few exciting activities right now to look at how we can actually liberate data across the entire enterprise so that we can actually go ahead and generate value from the data and monetize this. Right. So those are some of the initiatives. I'd be quite happy to share some of those insights during the panel discussion. Happy to be here.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Paddy. Looking forward to hearing about your experiences. Let me move on to Robert. Robert, please, can you introduce yourself as well?
Of course. Hello, Sundeep. Hello, everyone who's watching us. I've been in Petrobras for 10 years from now, and I always worked with subsea systems. And in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been working with digitalization of our process. And last year, focusing on change management to help adoption of these new technologies, subsea and corporate wide.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Robert. Botan, over to you.
Sundeep, thanks. Great to be here. Thanks to Tog and Future Oil and Gas for having us. I'm Botan Osman. I'm CEO of Restrata. I've been with Restrata for about over 8 years now, and have spent that time in various roles. And prior to that, my background is mostly in sort of digitization, what we used to call sort of IT transformation, and really focusing within Restrata on how do we move operations in the oil and gas, industrial, energy, renewable sector towards a more automated and sort of digitized state, especially focused on the resilience side. So our primary focus as a company is through the Restrata platform, which is helping companies around the world, including oil and gas companies, look after their people and assets and manage risks as they do that. And to do that well, we kind of help connect the last mile, and we help connect that at an enterprise level. But really good to be here and look forward to this particular discussion.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Botan. Really happy to have you here. And over to you then, Lynn.
Hi, thanks, Sundeep, and hello to everybody else. So it's Lynn Whitworth. I work for Datum 360, provider of a connected data platform called PIM 360. My personal sort of quick background is long time ago, mechanical engineer. Since then, really IT completion. So I was interested in the Asset 55 comments there, and latterly, of course, with Datum 360 direct to client services. And some of the items I'll be talking about a bit later on are from the various conversations that we've had with our client base.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lynn. So I think let's get on into our discussion, and I'm sure the audience is as excited as me to hear from your about your experiences and insights and learn from them. So maybe let me start with the first sort of topic of our discussion, which is about enabling data aggregation and classification. What we are trying to understand is maybe a little bit of insights into various operational models that can help us to improve business efficiency. And maybe why don't I start with Lynn? I believe, Lynn, you have done you have quite a bit of experience in this space, so really keen to hear of your experiences, and if you are able to share on particular projects or stuff that you've done in this space.
Sure. Thanks. Yes, so I'm going to end up discussing standardization of these types of models. But before I get there, I just wanted to quickly sort of set out what the model is, this data model that supports aggregation and classification. Now, the various clients we talk to have different data, of course, and some people are looking after equipment items, some mine shafts, functional locations, document numbers, but sort of data is data when you come to modeling. And all those objects tend to be grouped or classified into separate containers, and each of those containers or classes tends to have a group of attributes or requirements assigned. And that's a very basic class library, set of classifications and requirements, data requirements for each class. We find that is a common way of describing not really a data model, more a reference data library. And once an organization does that, and you can see that I'm not a spring chicken, so I've been doing this before Datum 360 on projects with assets as opposed to organizations. But once they have that, they have a common language. So a project might then have a common language to specify to the supply chain what a pump is and the information required for a pump. It also means that when the information arrives, when it's delivered, because you understand your requirement in a data-driven way, you can measure the completeness of that delivery. And of course, it means that you can aggregate very easily across the classes, across the attributes. So that's the basic class library. And there's been a cottage industry in developing those over the years. We're here to talk about standardization of this because of the way that enables the communication across large organizations, between organizations, up and down the supply chain. I've used in the past 15926, a good few years ago, NORSOC as well, although today it tends to be CFOS that I see being used the most. People are moving to CFOS. That's the Capital Facilities Information Handover Specification. it has an inbuilt RDL or class library, two terms which are pretty interchangeable. The problem with not CFOS, but with an international standard like that, is it will never 100% align with your business processes. I think we all know that. And the real work here is managing the difference between the standard that you adopt for good reason and what your business requirements are. I'll talk about that later on in one of the other subjects, how a way that we use to get across that and to help our customers manage that. And another key consideration when you're using a class library, RDL, especially when it comes from a third party, IOGP in this case with CFOS, is how do you roll that out across the organization? Is your ecosystem class library driven? Can it consume the class library? You've spent a lot of time having the organization buy in to this class library. There'll be incremental change via management of change over time. How do you make sure it's rippled out through that ecosystem? So the two challenges I see are identifying the difference, the delta between the standard and what your requirements are, and then how you roll that out. I'm probably going to talk about that a bit more, or can take questions on that later on. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for sharing. I see Robert has his hand up. Go for it, Robert.
Going further, not only international standards, it won't cover everything in your organization because Petrobras has this strategy, Shell has another, Petronas has another strategy, so things are parted. But even legally, when we talk regulations in Brazil, regulations in United Kingdom and other countries might have other focuses as well. So embrace a system that false. Every suite, every flavor of our objects is simply impossible. So I think my opinion is that we have to focus on ourselves, what is important for us, and get bridges between those standards. So international standard and the legal standard that we have in each country, and some get some key points between your the organizations in your supply chain and everything else. But first, focus and getting a good model for yourself.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I think the probably the challenge is, how do you, what is that balance, right, between standardization and customization, and how can you make it, the most efficient, but then also what you need, right? Yeah, and also keen to hear from Botan also in this space. I believe Botan, you have considerable experience also in this space. So please go ahead.
Yeah, Sundeep, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our focus now as Restrata is how do we take information and data that's related to safety, security, and resilience in this sector and other sectors, and create a standard around it. There's a lot of internal data that comes from an organization, whether that's from the IoT devices that are sending data up internally, whether that is from external sources related to risk, threat, and HSE issues. And stepping away from the technical side for a second, what we found to be effective is to ensure that all of that data has some kind of live original source that comes from it. The worst kind of data you could have is dead data that needs to be kind of manually sort of manually updated or is periodic. So our kind of focus with clients has been, how do you take what you have in the last mile and inside the operation? How do you make the collection of that be a process which makes life easier for the guys on the ground? Which that means that there's a guarantee of collection versus a chore that needs to take place. And as Lynn mentioned, then what standards exist out there in relation to that particular sort of data set that you can leverage? I mean, we have examples of risk data of incidents that take place. Let's imagine we're running an offshore farm somewhere. that requires weather to be one of the risk data elements, extremely real time data that might be coming in. How do you classify that as a risk status against sort of your own metrics kind of internally? So we found that when you try to classify, yes, there might be international standards against them, but how do you take each business area and say that the data that you're collecting and the way that you're processing it has the categorizations and the classifications that are relevant? I'll give you one example that we use when we integrate with access control systems, for example. So our whole focus is how do you make sure that people and assets are safer, right? So that's what the platform's all about. And what we found is, even though access control systems have been around for many years, there still isn't a unified kind of classification of the way that data comes in. And so, as Robert says, you end up with a sort of a standard for one company and a standard for another company. I think service providers that start to serve multiple companies within a particular discipline, we can start maybe not have a data standard that is applied. That kind of compliance is very difficult, but have the sort of software driven integrations be flexible enough to take in multiple standards depending on the way that the company wants to operate, because no one's business process is going to match the standard that you take in. So I think where we found success is ultimate flexibility at the ingestion end, making sure that continues to be ingested at the right way, and then again ultimate flexibility at the classification end, because it really, as a platform provider, it depends on the way that the company wants to use the data and what is sort of how to classify it within their own area. And I think integrations is something that I think is becoming easier and easier over time, and the kind of integrations that are achievable today, and the kind of pan system, pan discipline integrations that are achievable today, I think would have been very difficult to do 5 to 10 years ago. And so that makes the problem sort of harder, not easier, because it means you've got far more data to integrate, far more things to classify. And so, for me, it's all about creating software-driven flexibility in the way that these things are ingested, classified, and then later processed.
Perfect. Thanks so much for sharing, Botan. Let me quickly just move on to Paddy to check. Paddy, do you agree with everything, or is there something that you can share from your experience now, or even from IBM?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what each of the other panelists have been explaining. Right, I think it's a much more easier task when you have industry data standards that you can actually go ahead and ride on, right, and look at adopting. I think it's more challenging when you don't have industry standards and you have these particular processes internally which have been going on for many years. The kind of processes that you need to go out and put in place to go out and really identify, okay, what are those areas, right, that need to be addressed. In the context of Petronas itself, we have probably uh, a very large footprint across the world with a lot of specific groups where Petronas is probably a majority stakeholder, as well as internal different organizations. And then how do you really look at developing those particular standards across? So we developed some internal processes as well, right? So pretty much for each of the groups, we went ahead and started looking at identifying in terms of, okay, a kind of hierarchical pattern in which you start right at the lowest level to go ahead and identify, okay, what data is in use, do we have industry standards for it or not? And then we get these technical architects or the principals to go ahead and look at it. And then we identified in at least some domains where we have these group technical authorities, where these are the kind of people who would go ahead and say, okay, you know what, this is going to be the standard that needs to be adopted across. And we looked at going ahead and implementing it across the enterprise, right? So, I mean, it's an ongoing effort, and it's probably going to be nothing. It's something that you can't go out and fix overnight, but then at least it's a start in terms of the overall journey as such. But I agree with what each one of you guys have been sharing right now.
Right. Thanks so much, Paddy, and all our panelists. I think that probably nicely brings us to, let's say, the next the next big topic, and this buzzword has been around for quite some time now. Big data, and just looking to so this is about how is big data helping to decentralize the industry, and how are you using that, and leveraging big data, to towards a more successful cross discipline workflow. And maybe let me start with Robert. So Robert, would be really interested to hear your experience at Petrobras, and how have you been leveraging big data.
Um, First, we have to remember that when we started growing, uh, we also worked with a little documents, and we could handle everything. We alone, we were able to perform all the analysis. We were performing the insights because we had very little data. And when we start growing, oh, we have new sensors here. We have new images here. Now we have a whole video there, and we become from the scale from the megabytes to petabytes sometimes. Uh, we've reached a point that we can't handle ourselves all this data. Uh, Petrobras is an oil energy company, not the IT, the computer vision. So why not let those people who work with big data, who know how to process this data, help us, right? So when we and data, the same data we have, let's say, for us, it's important to keep some operation in a low level. That's say, no, my system is okay. But for the vendor who has that sensor, oh, how much is the sensor fluctuation? How much we are near to fail? How far we are from failing? So the same data has the different uses along for Petrobras, then maybe for the other supplier, then another for our clients after. Absolutely the same data. And there comes the standardization we talked about earlier. Because how do we share this data? How do we process all this data? So letting start that rule and facilitates this interoperability is the concept we talk about, that every data has a meaning and every data has not only the value, it has a context. So when we start getting a big data, when we get uh, starting getting help from our suppliers, from IT, like all those those partners we have from technology, we are starting to decentralize the industry. And let's say we have some computer vision that works. It detects corrosion. Let's take the example. Corrosion is important for oil and gas. The corrosion is important for mining industry and everyone. So once you liberate this data, no, the whole ecosystem has gets an advantage. So we have to wait where we have to share and what is our business value across. So we started seeing that initiatives like the open dataset image from Google, that has data from people, from cats, from dogs, and those testing for computer vision, if you're familiar with. We might do something like that to get the next step for generate value to ourselves also, because we can now share our experience and other operators, and the whole industry gets this collaboration. And with collaboration, we start to break those tiles.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Robert. That was really interesting. So, Paddy, I don't know, do you have a similar experience of your work in Petronas so far?
We do, as a matter of fact, as part of the one of the initiatives that we're working on right now is basically setting up of this particular data hub called as an enterprise data hub, right? So what we realized early on is that if you need to go out and realize value from data, right? So it has to be you need to have a very clear cut strategy in terms of, okay, how are you going to go out and monetize it, right? And one of the key things is really to go ahead and eliminate data silos and really see in terms of, okay, how do you liberate data across the entire enterprise so that you can realize value across the value chain. So we do identify that big data plays a key role in this particular case, and specifically in our context, we look at it from uh, a lot of unstructured data that exists within the enterprise. Right? So in any given organization, right? I mean, there's probably a lot of research which says that 80 to 90% of the data that exists within the organization, probably in the form of documents or spreadsheets or anything like that, is probably unstructured. So really, how do you go ahead and harness the value out of it, right? So we look at it more from how do we really trace all of this particular unstructured data or that exists within the enterprise. How do you trust it, more importantly, right? That whether the data that you're really looking at it, and then how do you go ahead and monetize it, right? So we look at each one of these in different segments in terms of, okay, to trace, trust, and monetize. That becomes a mantra towards harnessing the value from unstructured data, right? And we go ahead and look at putting in systems across or other processes which help aid this particular activity for us. There are a few other initiatives that we look at in terms of, okay, how do you digitize these engineering drawings or stuff like that. Some of these particular drawings are really legacy drawings that might have been there, which you have in files and whatnot. Now, can you go ahead and use computer vision to go ahead and identify some important key aspects from these particular engineering drawings? Can you go ahead and use that for generating key insights and whatever that you want to go ahead and achieve? So it's not necessarily in the gamut of big data, but then it does come into the purview of advanced analytics. But it's just an extension of it. That's how I go ahead and look at it.
Right, right. Yeah, trace, trust, and monetize. So I'll remember that. Yeah, that's pretty catchy. So maybe Botan, do you have any? I'm sure Restrata must be doing a lot of work, with the type of work that you do. Can you share some insight or some experience of how do you help organizations leverage the tons and tons of data that is produced?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, we look at a particular, you know, problem kind of domain within the organizations, which is operationalizing data as it relates to safety, security, and kind of business continuity and kind of resilience. And what we find when we first start working with clients is that there's a hell of a lot of unstructured data, as Paddy mentioned, that amazingly is used on a day-to-day basis. And so it's kind of good old Excel, updated on a daily or weekly basis, literally used as an operational point. And this is you could be talking about blue chip or SME type companies. It's similar situations arise. So then you end up with kind of two challenges there. How do you automate the process that ends up requiring the spreadsheet? So you kill the use of unstructured data moving forward. Kill is, or sunset is probably a less violent term, right? You sunset the use of unstructured data over time. And as you do that, you kind of make the problem go in the past, but then moving forwards, have that sort of automated or digitized process, then be part of the bigger picture. So I think it's really important not only to try and process unstructured data, but find the source of it and try to sunset those through automation. And as I said previously, we have found that there's if you, while sunsetting that data and replacing it, create a operational efficiency in the way that they act on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, what we find is that becomes quite sticky because then the guys on the ground, would like to continue with that process versus use what they had before. But from the on the topic of kind of big data and everybody kind of looking at the same thing, we found that most most benefit is gained from when as Robert said, when everybody looks at the same thing but from a completely different vantage point. So you could have sensors that are detecting, Bluetooth sensors specifically, that are detecting the location of individuals, or the location of assets on a particular site, and the accuracy of that is being managed by maybe the ops and maintenance team and some of the IT team, and that's not really relevant for the management of the day-to-day safety. When a muster is ongoing and that data is being used for that in the live operation, that's a HSC concern, right? And then as that becomes historic data, it becomes workforce optimization, and it becomes kind of more sort of operational sort of concerns. And when you look at it from a multi-site perspective, let's say you're an operator that has 30 sites in a particular country, that then becomes data that's relevant to keeping the people safe. So I think avoiding data silos is one of the is one of the most effective ways that we have found, or integrating data silos is one of the most effective ways that we have found. It's easier said than done, because ultimately people resort to the easiest way to do things, and often the Microsoft Excel curse will come through. People will find that the easiest way to record data, great spreadsheets with lots of different colors, but ultimately it's only useful to the person that wrote it and isn't sort of reconstituted. We sometimes deal with clients that have 20 countries. They have in one particular country 7,000 people, 20 sites, 250 mobile assets, and moving people movement and logistics workflow data is recorded in an Excel spreadsheet for a particular asset or for a particular operation. It's completely unusable apart from to that one person that is managing the journeys, right? And when you speak to the regional sort of center, they say, well, that would be fantastic data if we could have it at our fingertips, because then we could understand asset utilization. You'd speak to security and go, well, that would be great, because then you would know if there was an incident where anybody is. You speak to HSC and it's the same. So I think everybody has the same interest, but it's often from kind of different vantage points. And I think that's when, that's where the kind of the data can be. But again, our task is a little easier because we're focused on safety, security, and resilience. When you look at total company data, that's kind of the focus that Lynn and his company and others would have.
Thanks so much, Botan. Yeah, that was that was really insightful. Lynn, Botan referred to you and to Datum 360, and I don't know if you agree with everything. Do you have something you want to add from the work that you have been doing?
Just a couple of points, really. I think most of it's been covered. Just wanted to make these 2 points. One is, yes, it's big data. That's a dimension. It's still data, so it still needs to be connected to the organization wherever you can. So that sensor that was mentioned by Robert will be part of a device. It will have a model number. It'll have a calibrated range. They have a tag number. Be on a drawing. So just because it's big and it's captured in real time for trending, perhaps, it still deserves to be connected to the organizational class library, and brings a lot of value if it is. Asset 55 will like that because of the completion side as well. The other thing, and this is really from discussing this with peers, is that when you go to use the big data, start off with the business case first. What is it I want to find from the big data? Then start investing. Don't go and play with the big data and find out what you can do. It's initially quite interesting, but ultimately it doesn't solve your business cases. Thank you.
Indeed. Thanks, Lynn. I think that's the sort of million or billion dollar question, right? So yeah, what is the business use of it? Perfect. So maybe let's switch gears a bit, and then moving into the next, let's say big, buzzword of cloud platforms, and always the at least to me, there's always that dilemma, right? Of how far you should go in in leveraging third-party cloud platforms to using your own in-house data centers, and probably some industries or some types of data are more sensitive, and you might want to keep them in-house, and how do you measure the accessibility, and what is the data ownership piece. So I was wondering, if going back to Robert, if you can share a little bit about how is Petrobras tackling this, how are you addressing these dilemmas.
Well, Petrobras has been working cloud for very little time. We started in heavily investing in cloud platforms in barely 2 years, I believe, with AWS and Azure. But we started the cloud with the simplest application we could have, no? FTP server. Instead of having an FTP server to receive our data from our suppliers, no? Daily we receive about 200 hours of footage from our inspections. Then we have a big, a lot of pipes and equipment needs to be inspected. So we had to receive all this data, and so we could process, we could do the inspections, we could do everything. And they have some time ago we received activities. Then we started with the server, but when you got your own server, you have to keep it up. You have to bring all the space and the storage. You have to work hard from the infrastructure, and we discovered also that our suppliers, from the operation, that they had to compress a lot the videos. So what we thought we would be on 2 3 gigabytes when the original footage had 10, 12 because of the quality. So we started, thought, okay, let's make a third party. So it serves as good if everyone has received it, if clouds are generally auditable. So no, I upload. No, you didn't upload. Where's it? And so those conflicts, if we have, because we have some schedules to receive those data. So hey, you didn't receive, we didn't, and and then it started on with this exchange with this data from supplier to us, and then started, hey, other group started. We need to see those stuff. Okay, how do we do that? Get the cloud, access, grant. Simple. So cloud has become a very reliable source to keep all those information, all those big data we were receiving, and medical the footage with sonar systems and all those inspection sensors data to receive, and everyone instantly has the access. Everyone is notified. Everyone, and our inspection times went from month to week, as in there on that scale, because everyone had access to that. And and when we work in cloud, it is to grant and to uh, revoke the access from there. So becomes a very trustful source of information, and with the bonus that we don't have to keep the infrastructure, sorry, all alive, and for some that are not data critical application, it fits perfect our needs. Not everything should be in the cloud, but when we have all the supply chain, all those information, cloud becomes a great partner for us to keeping the wheel moving.
Thanks so much for sharing that insight, Robert. I just want to check, with Botan, do you have a similar sort of recommendation for your clients, or how do you see it?
Yeah, so I mean, to start with, I mean, the cloud is just someone else's computer, right? So to bring it to bear, there's incredible investments now in to make cloud technology, smoother, to work with and more secure. So I think the debate on cloud that we were having 10 years ago and 5 years ago in the industry is now, I think the idea that it's reliable and that you can use it is pretty well adopted. I don't think that debate is still raging. However, data ownership it can be an issue. Data location can be an issue. So we find that some of the companies we work with, not because of their own policy, but because of host nation policies, need to store data in the cloud, fine, but in the cloud of that country or on premise in that country. That creates data location complexity, especially when it comes to personally identifiable data for that country. So that creates challenges, even if the operator would like to have it stored. I think also, from a data ownership perspective, the way we operate is that we provide cloud first solutions, but then of course, segregation, tenancy, and everything else. It's absolutely the client's data, and they have access to it all the way to the to the line, to the record, right? And we have specific comfort levels in our sort of solutions that enables clients to get that data out if ever they were to kind of move on. But this is about moving at a pace that enables both innovation and enables you to kind of fail fast. The kind of projects that required all of these companies to build their own systems or build their own hosts and everything else, I think limits this pace of progress. And I think what we're able to do with our cloud solutions is provide companies who, let me use a very recent example. We had a company that had one central processing facility and 13 drilling sites and about 2 or 3 other ancillary sites in a particular country. They had very, very, very limited day-to-day visibility of people, assets, and where things were, right? And they had a consideration of, well, do we want to host it locally, and do we want to do it? And they had all sorts of project plans that were going to take quite a few months into a year to kind of get that going with their own hosted environment. We've been able to put on the table a kind of a 4 to 6 week plan to basically bring them to bear, put a lot of the hardware in place, connect it all up. It's all in place, and they're able to move very fast and actually start to focus on the business change that is the hardest part versus, as Robert says, where do we host this? What should it look like? Is there availability or not? But I think just a final point on cloud is that in the oil and gas industry, there is a limitation, and the limitation is connectivity. And although everybody has a digitization agenda, we still find offshore, onshore sites that have very limited or intermittent cloud, internet connectivity. And so, one of the things that we've started to invest in is what we call offline resilience, which is the ability not to detach the system completely and have it localized, but have if you like, a fail-safe or a locally hosted, data points that enables, connectivity to be lost and the work to kind of continue in a more live operational set. That creates a level of trust, especially for safety critical systems, that enables you to go back. So I would say the debate on cloud is kind of over. I think it enables companies to really focus on the business change that's kind of needed. But host governments can become, the debate with them isn't over, but maybe that's the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. No, very, very valid points, and all these different lenses, right? Different regulations, and maybe pulling in different directions to what the client or what the operator really needs to do. So interested to hear, Paddy, your views also on this. Is there anything you can share on how is Petronas addressing these different challenges?
I think there's no doubt that you can't harness any benefits from moving to the cloud, right? I think that's a given that given the economies of scale, right, you are going to go ahead and have significant benefits in terms of the monetary gains or operational efficiency or any other uh, expenses that you can cut down on, right? So that's a given. But I think, touching upon, or rather just extending upon what Botan mentioned regarding, connectivity being one of the key, measures of success here. The other critical measure of success here, or rather success measure for, the cloud migration or any strategy there is basically going to be, the underlying governance that you're going to go and put across that, right? I think more in terms of the data access, the data security, the ownership, the how do you manage sovereign data? There are certain data that you don't want to go ahead and handle out of your boundaries. And then there's also this particular thing in terms of, okay, that in a very heterogeneous kind of a setup where you have multiple groups that you need to go ahead and manage, right? And each one of them going ahead and creating their own cloud setups, and then how do you bring together these particular environments? That becomes another challenge. uh, so at least in the case of Petronas, what we did is basically, when it comes to the data and analytics related initiatives, right, we wanted to go ahead and look at setting up basically one true source for all analytics needs for the entire enterprise, right? So what that typically means is that you can go ahead and host your data anywhere on any particular cloud of your choice if you need to. But then when it comes to any digital project that Petronas is going to go out and venture out on, right, for realizing value across the entire enterprise, those particular data should ideally come from one single true source. And for us, that is basically the enterprise data hub that we're working on, right? So that way, what we're doing is mainly in terms of, okay, eliminating all those particular data silos and all of that, and bringing in all the data into one single platform. And while we are definitely going to go out and gain huge benefits in terms of the economies of scale that I was mentioning, but also in terms of our operational excellence improvements there are also significant, because once we bring that particular data, right, we also go ahead and follow something called curate once, used by many, right? So if there is a particular data set that we are able to go ahead and bring onto the platform, curated it once, and any other digital projects that we have across the enterprise, they could just simply go ahead and lift off that particular data already, right, without having to reinvest in terms of trying to model it again, right? So those are the ways in which we are really able to go ahead and realize benefits. But then the underlying statement there is governance is extremely critical, right? I mean, you can achieve wonders, but then I think the main platform there is basically the data governance part of it.
Indeed, thanks so much, Paddy, for sharing your insight. So that I think is a nice segue into then what is the how do you manage sort of the legacy systems as well, and how do you sort of integrate them into the new systems, right? That companies are adopting, and how do you sort of democratize these advanced analytics. And just looking to Lynn, Lynn, I believe you have quite a bit of experience working in this space. Can you share some thoughts?
Yes, of course. Thank you. I just wanted to add something about the cloud conversation. I've been with Data 360 8 years. We have a software as a service platform, cloud-based. And 8 years ago, the first question from a client would be something like, what's the cloud? Where is it? Who owns the data? Nowadays, one of the first questions is, are you cloud compliant? Can you deliver to the cloud? So just supporting what the guys have said, things have changed. So legacy systems. What's a legacy system? And how old does a system have to be called legacy? If it's been installed for 6 months and it's up and running, is that a legacy system? I think when you're looking forward at the new systems for your digital transformation, most of the systems you have installed are probably legacy systems. And as such, they're probably your mission critical systems. They're the ones that you lean on, you rely on, people understand them, you've got value out of them. So they absolutely have to be brought into the ecosystem going forward. And how do you do that? I have no silver bullets here. But one of the ways that we've done that with our clients is to make sure that those legacy systems are included in the IDL class library. That because they are legacy systems, they sometimes have very specific data requirements to support the functionality of that system. And you have to make sure that as an organization, you bring that into your requirements. And those requirements, of course, perhaps from the legacy systems, will be a superset of the international standard that you've chosen. So again, touching on what we've been talking about, as a business, you need to understand your requirements. Now, I'm not allowed to use PowerPoint here, so I'm going to use finger point. You need to understand your requirements. Let me see if that's working. And you have an international standard like this. And what you want to do over time is merge the two like this. You can imagine a Venn diagram, can't you? So in the middle, you want that. You start off like this. So this bit here are your business requirements. You need to make sure you understand those for the legacy systems that butt up against the international standard. Over time, those legacy systems will disappear naturally, and this will happen. You'll just be using that international standard. Pretty ideal, I understand that, but that's the direction of travel, I think. That's how you make sure your legacy systems are part of the story going forward. What is more difficult with them is the actual technicality of the integration. Part of the cloud solution, a good cloud solution will have RESTful APIs, have an open architecture, and can be part of the ecosystem. Legacy systems, not quite so much so. Sometimes really quite closed, and that really needs a piece of middleware or a way of transferring files out of those systems into the rest of the ecosystem. So for me, the real challenge is the way they are closed, not so much the way that you can bring them into your data model for the organization. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Lynn. Paddy, you spoke a little bit about then having this one single source of truth or data analytics capability. Did you encounter any challenges with between moving between the legacy and there's always then business concerns and and risks and so on in that migration, and how did you address those?
So I mean, it's not really to do with the concerns between the legacy systems as such, but I think it's more in terms of, okay, how do we really share the data across the enterprise, right? I mean, you have different business units with different data owners and different classifications of data that you can probably go ahead and consider as open, internal, secret, confidential, and others. So then that's when somebody wants to go ahead and really access this particular data and really utilize it for generating insights and value across the enterprise. The biggest impediment that actually would arise there is in terms of, okay, trying to work through the hierarchy in terms of the organizational hierarchy in terms of trying to find the particular data. And if you're able to go out and successfully find the data, the next thing is basically in terms of, okay, how do you really curate that particular data or build those particular data models to go out and give you those particular insights and stuff like that, right? So in our case, we did find that particular issue as a challenge because we wanted to go out and create this enterprise data platform where we want to democratize analytics or the access to data for every single data practitioner, right? So that is one of the things. So we had to go out and really work with data owners across the enterprise and really work with them to go out and define the governance standards, which basically indicate, okay, how that particular data is going to be utilized, under what circumstances, who can access it, all of that stuff. Now, while that is going to go ahead and make sure that practitioners are able to go out and find data very easily, and without really having to jump through hoops, so it's actually reducing the amount of time it takes for you to go out and access that particular data. But what is the other side is basically, okay, once you have access to that data, right, what do you do with it, right? I mean, if you're going to go out and utilize, advanced analytic techniques, you want to go out and create your own visualizations on, let's say, Click or Power BI or IBM Cognos or any other solution like that, you need to have that particular skill and capability to go out and look at, working through your data as well. So for us, basically, while we are looking at it from the foundational knowledge in terms of, okay, how to work with that particular data. So we also established a citizen analytics program within Petronas, right? So and our goal there is basically to go ahead and look at converting all of these traditional skilled resources across the enterprise into data practitioners as an additional skill set, so that they have that comfort level in looking at data and trying to go out and utilize advanced tools for generating insights on their own. So we managed to cover this particular education for over 7,000 practitioners across the enterprise. I mean, out of 45,000 odd people that we have, and at
Wow.
different levels. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
so we look at foundational knowledge in terms of everything to do with basics of Power BI for analysis, or even giving them overview or digital skills in terms of agile methods, anything which is basically a 21st century skill set that is really essential for the workforce. And then we also go ahead and look at a slightly advanced level of analytics programs for people who are going to go ahead and perform data modeling on their own, right? So that's how. So it's one where basically we're going to go ahead and create that particular platform and provide data and advanced analytics solutions as a service through the enterprise data platform. At the same time, we are also going ahead and looking at training and developing that capability among the people so that they can also go ahead and really leverage the digital products that is going to be made available to them so that they can harness the value and insights from it. And like one of the examples that I mentioned, the citizen analytics program, we also established these communities of practice on data and analytics, and we go ahead and conduct weekly, monthly, guest speakers to come and talk to the teams, share industry best practices and everything, so that organizational communication and change management with respect to data is kept as an ongoing activity, so that there is a line of sight and visibility to all the people within the enterprise in terms of what data is and how they can actually harness value out of it. So that's what we do.
Right. Thanks so much, Patty, for sharing your experience. We have one interesting question actually from someone in the audience related to cloud and security. And I mean, I don't know who's the right person, but maybe maybe let me point to Botan. So the question is. How do you gain confidence that cloud is set up securely? You almost need to hire hackers to attempt to penetrate the cloud. So is this sort of security? Do you think security is still a concern with so many sort of breaches? We hear with some bank data being sort of breached, or different data being breached. So how what is your impression on data security using cloud platforms?
I, I think it's a great question. I think cloud doesn't make things less secure. It makes things sort of more secure. You still have to secure data, even if it's sitting in your data center, unless you completely disconnect it from the internet. So security is a concern, whether it's on premise in the server room or in the cloud. Now, not all cloud is the same, right? So that's something to be aware of. So one SaaS platform may have end to end software driven security infrastructure. Depends what standards they follow. We are pen tested all the time by our prospective clients. We follow a strict set of protocols in the way not only that we secure our infrastructure, but in the way that we build our systems. And both in the build and in the securing of infrastructure, there are certain standards and certain things that you have to follow. So I think it is a definite area of questioning that should be happening when companies are either migrating themselves to the cloud or using SaaS-based platforms like Restrata platform, for example, in the cloud. There should be questions that are asked, and we regularly go on calls with clients to explain to them how secure we are, etc. So yes, of course, pen testing is important, but also to demonstrate the security that you have. But I think you can be, in my opinion, you can be a lot more secure in the cloud than you are in your data center, because there are certain considerations that you have to make when it's server based in your office that you don't really need to make in the cloud. There's a lot more opportunity to be secure in the cloud. So I think that, again, that debate was raging 10 years ago, and I think now it's pretty clear.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Botan. I'm conscious of time. I can I can probably go on for for hours. But I've learned a lot in the last 1 hour. And I'm really grateful to our esteemed panelists, for sharing all of your experience and insight. And hopefully our audience also found it as insightful as I did. I'll probably on behalf of future oil and gas, and also personally from me, thank you so much for being here. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we meet each other in person next time.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thanks
so
very
much.
much. Thanks, Sundeep.
Right
Take
on.
care.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.